In 2011, 5,864 fatal car accidents involved teenagers. It's an absolutely mind-numbing statistic. Of all those crashes, there were a select group of people that were lucky enough to walk away on their own terms, without any major physical harm. But there's a big gray area in these situations. What about the ones who live but don't walk away? The ones who don't go home to the comforts of their families, but rather are put in hands of doctors and hospitals. An average of 400,000 teenagers each year require emergency treatment after a car collision. I was not in any car crash, but I can give you some insight on what happens to those 400,000. My name's Cohan, and I'm a senior here at Manalapan High School. After 4 years of hard work, I found myself a starting spot on the varsity soccer team. Our first game was something I'd been looking forward to my whole life. However, 45 minutes into that opening day on September 12th, my entire life was flipped upside down. In a collision with the other team's goalie, I suffered a compound fracture of my tibia and fibula. Yup, that's the one where the bone comes through the skin and all that gross stuff. I remember just sitting there on the field and telling the coaches and trainers that circled me, "Don't let my mom see, don't let my mom see." I knew whatever happened to me at this point was not good for any mother to witness. I was right. I was rushed immediately to the hospital. After the fact, I heard that I had lost so much blood on the field that it had to be raked out before the game could continue. It's crazy, but I remember every single second of that awful ambulance ride. My first thought when the stretcher was raised into the truck was, I'll be okay. I'll go to the hospital tonight, get fixed whatever I need to be fixed, and I'll be back on the field in November for the state playoffs. Now I say, wow, I was an idiot. But back then, I was just another teenager, thinking I'm invincible and nothing can bring me down. I mean, my bone completely pierced the skin, and I thought, hey, I'll be in the starting lineup again in a few weeks. I quickly discovered that I am not invincible. We are not invincible. No one is invincible. My last vivid memory of that night is having my bloody jersey cut off my body for the x-rays. I had 3 surgeries that first week to put a rod in my leg and then clean out everything to prevent infections. I made a return to my house and was on bed rest to find out after a week that an infection had appeared at the first skin graft. For those of you who don't know, a skin graft is where they shave a layer of skin off another part of your body with a cheese grater-like tool in order to close a wound. This involved going back to the hospital for 2.5 weeks and getting 3 more surgeries. The main obstacle was that I needed something in between my bone and my skin. The last one was a 6-hour muscle flap surgery, where they take a muscle from my groin, move it down to my lower shin, and reconnect the blood vessels there, and then put a new skin graft on top of that. From that hospital stay, I went to a pediatric rehab center connected to Robert Wood Johnson. I spent 3 weeks at Children's Specialized Hospital. My first day there was a struggle to stand up without getting dizzy. Every day I worked harder than I ever had in my life, and I was only making baby steps. Weeks earlier, I was in the best shape of my life and I could run a 6-minute mile. Now I was so physically drained that I would take 10 steps with a walker and be short of breath. It's heartbreaking to know that you're doing all you can and you're still barely improving. One of the scariest parts of the whole journey was the other kids I met at rehab. Kids that would spend a lot more than 3 weeks as a patient there. Kids who suffered brain or spinal cord injuries, and who made my case look like an easy one. On November 5th, I finally crunched my way out the door. I thought the worst was behind me. I needed a few more weeks back home before I got to school. I finally got to experience being a senior in high school. I shed a tear on the way to first period that day, remembering the road I had taken. After 10 days back in these hallways, however, I received more heartbreak. I had 2 doctor's appointments on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The doctors determined that some draining from the wound meant some other infection had most likely hit the titanium rod in my leg. I spent that night and the following 8 days in the hospital to have 3 more surgeries that consisted of removing the infected rod and replacing it with a new one. Thanksgiving, the one day every family in America spends together, my mom and dad sat in a waiting room while I was being operated on. After that last extended stay in Jersey Shore Medical Center, I came home and eventually made it back to school right after winter break. With that round of surgeries, I also incurred foot drop. It's a nerve issue that results in the loss of motion at your ankle. I elected to have my 10th and final surgery January 25th, where they removed bone marrow from my femur and moved it to a spot in my tibia where it was missing. So there you go. Now you're all experts on what could possibly go wrong in a compound fracture. I wasn't in any car crash, but every single nurse that treated me thought I was a car accident victim for sure. Waking up every day at 4 a.m. to needles in your veins, going through the day in utter pain with no energy to move, needing such high dosages of pain medicine that you actually develop an addiction and then have to break that addiction before you can go home, barely staying awake for the good friends and family that would visit, constant nausea and throwing up the little food that you do have appetite for, crying yourself to sleep every single night to the thought of, why me? The toughest night emotionally of this whole journey was the night of the homecoming football game. All of my peers were at the field cheering on the Braves, pumped up to be in the presence of their classmates, and I was in a wheelchair, writing my college essays, crying to my parents. Senior year is supposed to be the best year of your academic life. I spent the first 4 months of mine in and out of hospitals. 10 surgeries in 54 days in hospitals and rehab. Days I will never get back. Days that I wasn't even half of myself. I missed my entire senior soccer season, the state championship football game, homecoming week, the holidays with my family, going to school, hanging with friends, being a kid. At a time when you're supposed to gain independence, I lost all of mine. Who would think a 17-year-old would need help in and out of the shower and getting dressed in the morning? I finally drove a car for the first time in 6 months this past weekend. Crazy. High school students are used to getting answers instantly today. You don't know something? Google it. You want to know what your friends are up to? Check Facebook. You want world news? Reload Twitter. Unfortunately, the hardest questions in life do not have simple, instant answers. It's been 6 months from when this all started, and even with all the progress I have made, there's no timetable for my full recovery. One last thing I want to hit on is the importance of family. Every single night, my parents slept on the hospital floor next to me, and my brother flew home every weekend from college to hug me before I went to the operating room. They were the ones to get me water in the middle of the night and to get the nurses when I was screaming in pain. At one point, I was on an IV pump where I could administer my own drugs every 10 minutes by pressing a button. My parents and brother would stay up through the night to press that button so that I could get some rest and wouldn't have to wake up in agony. At times when I thought the world had forgotten about me, they were there to cheer me on. To bring me food whenever I asked, only to throw out half of it because I would get sick. To help me wash up and brush my teeth, and to be there every second of the way. I remember when I first got to rehab, I was just so happy to be out of the hospital and surrounded by potential help. My mom cried with happiness because she said she was so happy to have her Jake back. She said it was the first time in a month that I was smiling. You don't want to go a month without seeing your child smile. I didn't come up here to get your sympathy. I've received more sympathy in the past 6 months than one would ever need. I came up here to share an important message. Your health is the most important asset in your life. At such a crucial time for fun and energy, I was robbed of mine. I endured more pain and heartbreak than any teenager ever should, and all this happened because of a soccer game. Now imagine you were hurt in a car crash, and you were driving drunk at 60 or 70 miles per hour, and boom, like that, you discover that you also are no longer invincible. Your entire life is flipped upside down, and you could end up with way more than 10 surgeries, or even worse, dead.